Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We're going to get started and folks can drop in as they get time today. We're super excited to have everyone here with us this morning. My name is Alexis Miller. I work at Solar United Neighbors, and we're really excited to have you joining our nonprofit Solar United Neighbors along with the American Solar Energy Society and Generation 180 for the 25th Annual National Solar Tour. We're Solar United Neighbors, a national nonprofit that helps people to go solar, join together, and fight for your energy rights. The National Solar Tour is the largest grassroots renewable energy event in the country and features hundreds of videos, otherwise known as tours, of solar panels on rooftops and grounds and everywhere throughout the country, and gives solar supporters the opportunity to connect, to join live sessions such as this one, about solar and electric vehicles and other solar related topics. Today, you're attending our policy session on community solar. We have plenty more sessions that have happened throughout the week, and then we have several more later today. So I encourage you to check those out. I'll drop a link in the chat so that you can see what other events that we have happening during this National Solar Tour week. And the tours will also be up throughout the weekend, so feel free to check those out. And if you can't get enough of solar, join us next week for the National Solar Congress. The National Solar Congress is a way for solar supporters across the country to come together and participate in sessions ranging from skills trainings to state-specific sessions about solar in your state and community and everything in between. So don't miss out on connecting with like-minded folks in your state and across the country. I'll drop that RSVP link in the chat as well. And then you can feel free to RSVP for the sessions that you're interested in that will be starting next week. Now, without further ado, we are joined by Liz Veazey and Glenn Brand, who are our advocacy team at Solar United Neighbors, and I'll kick it over to them. Thank you again for being here.
Thanks, everybody. My name is Glenn Brand, and I'm the National Policy and Advocacy Director for Solar United Neighbors. And normally based in DC. I'm in my apartment in DC. Liz Veazey is also a part of the policy and advocacy team, and she's based in Omaha. And we'll let me start share the screen, and I'll tell you about the logistics and how we're going to proceed. Let's see if this works. There we go. So the subject today is putting community in community solar programs, and that's necessary because not all community solar programs are true community solar programs, as we'll talk about today. And it can be very confusing if from a participant's or prospective participant's point of view, is the community solar project that you're thinking about a good deal? Is it worthwhile? You know, how can you tell? What are the questions to ask? And so those are some of the things that we're going to try to get to today. I'll give a presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A, and then and hopefully a discussion. Practically speaking, if you are not sure about how to ask questions in Zoom, you'll see that there's a chat and a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and you can click at any time. You don't have to wait until the Q&A section. You could just, as questions occur to you, you can just type them in and we'll get to them as best we can. If you are having any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can just post to the chat and we'll try to respond and resolve those problems. So I wanted to start by just talking about you know, our approach to solar in general, but also community solar. We strongly believe that we have solar rights, and that means the fundamental freedom to make our own energy choices, and that specifically means for solar, the right to go solar without interference from monopoly utilities. And that's a tension that we are dealing with, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. We'll talk a little more about that. This presentation really is an adaptation of a fully fleshed out guide to community solar that that's available on our website. And towards the end of this session, this presentation, I'll point you to where to find this information. So be assured that you can just download or take a look at the our guide to community solar, which has all of this information as well. So, what's community solar? The fact is that if we're going to broaden solar access to everybody in the United States, we cannot just do it with rooftop solar on residential buildings and businesses, because many buildings are not suitable for rooftop solar. Either the roof is not adequate, or there's too much shade and it's positioned wrong, or people can't afford the upfront cost. That's clearly an issue for many people. And many people in the United States live and work in rental properties, of course. And so that's the reality here is that that doesn't mean they can't go solar, and that's what community solar projects are all about. So a simple definition for community solar, if you're not familiar, is that these projects enable individuals, businesses, or organizations to purchase or lease a share in a specific nearby solar installation, and they then receive a credit on their electric bill each month for the energy produced by that share. I mean, you could think of it kind of like a version of a condo share, right? You're buying a little piece of a larger project, but in this case, of course, you're benefiting from the solar power. And so here's a handy little image that shows you how it works. The solar panel sends electricity to the grid, and the utility sells that electricity, and then they credit the solar power to your bills, subscribers' bills, right? So that's kind of a simple illustration of how it works. Now, you might notice that it's critically important in this cycle for the utility to collaborate. And that's really the stumbling block here. I'm going to move this out of the way. Before you can receive a credit for your share in a community solar project, your utility must participate in a community solar program. And that means that there needs to be either, in most states, you have to have enabling legislation that allows for this, that sets out the rules, or in a few places, the Public Utility Commissions have set forth these policies. Currently, there's 20 states have some form of community shared solar policy. And you can take a look at this map in a larger one later. It's sharedrenewables.org. There's nothing special about this map. There are many of these, but this is the where I got it from. And in addition, many rural co-ops, that is electric cooperatives and municipal utilities, offer a form of community solar to their customers. So if you take a look at this map, just to be clear, the gray states do not offer community solar on a statewide basis. The yellow ones, and I'm not sure what the orange one is to tell you the truth, but I know Washington has community solar. The yellow ones are where there's community solar in place, and that's the 20 I referred to, includes Hawaii at the bottom. The ones in blue are, and we should add Pennsylvania to that, are the ones where there's an active campaign right now. Legislation is being considered to enable community solar. So you can take just a glance, you'll see, of course, you have the West Coast and the East and Mid-Atlantic, and then some very important projects in Colorado, Minnesota, and Illinois, as well as now beginning into the South in North Carolina. Okay. Now, you might even actually take a look at this map and you say, well, my state's not on this, it's not colored in yellow, but I've heard of community solar being offered by my utility. So that's the case, for example, in Florida, where Florida Power and Light has a program that they refer to as community solar. And these programs are subscriber programs. They're not really community solar in the way that we're about to discuss. But again, we can talk more about that in the Q&A. Now, we developed in our guide some principles to help us distinguish between true community solar and other kinds of programs that purport to be community solar. So in no particular order, though probably the top one is the most important for many people, We think community solar projects must have meaningful, verifiable electricity savings to subscribers. That's one of the reasons why people go solar. That's the benefits of owning solar, is that you save money on your electricity bills, in addition to all the other benefits. It is not uncommon for the savings to be around the 20% level. It's very hard to generalize about this, but that is basically what we and you should, I think, expect to receive if you're going to subscribe to community solar program. And if it's not offering that, we need to figure out why. And usually involves these other principles. We also think that utilities should not be running the community solar programs. Opportunities should exist under every program for third-party ownership. So say you and your neighbors and your church want to start a community solar project, they should be able to enter in a contract to do that and build the project as they see fit. So that's a really important principle. Do third parties have the ability to compete against utilities to run these programs? Thirdly, and this would be true, of course, of any business transaction, but is it clear what you're signing up for? Is there a customer-friendly process? Sometimes it's hard to know how to ask that question. So we'll get into that a little more, but it's really important that this be as simple as possible and that you know exactly what is being offered and what the conditions are. We think one of the distinguishing features between a true community solar project and those subscription services that purport to be are the local benefits. So we think a community solar project should have a clear connection to a specific solar project or group of projects in nearby locations. This should not be some sort of credit that's coming from out of state. This should be a nearby local benefit. It's really important that these projects be sited responsibly. There are clearly better ways to do community solar, in fact, how it fits in with the community goals and making sure that there are the least amount of negative developmental impacts. Community solar projects, like every development project, have some downsides. There's no doubt about it. But the key here is to follow well-established siting guidelines to make sure that it has the least impact. We developed a guide to responsible siting for community solar projects, and I'll be showing you that in a little while. We also think that community solar projects offer an opportunity for local job creation. So if you have a local project, it really makes sense to have local employers, a local solar installer or developer to be involved in the project. And also it's a great opportunity to strengthen and upgrade the electric grid, right? You're building something, it's going to add to the grid, and we should take opportunities to make sure that that happens. Community solar really is the primary way that we can expand solar access to people who can't afford it. And it's essential, really, if we're going to realize our goals of getting community solar, of getting solar in the hands of everyone in the United States, and I mean everyone, then we're going to have to ensure that community solar programs incentivize low and middle income participation. And that means some common sense things. There should be short contract term lengths because people move, right? They should be able to bring their share of the solar with them. There should be minimal or no cancellation fees. They should make it as easy as possible. Right now, at least 10 states have low-income provisions in their community solar programs, and you can find out more information about those programs at lowincomesolar.org. And it's really important, since so many people rent in the United States. I'm a renter, and I subscribe to a community solar project here. It's really important that residents of multi-unit buildings be able to subscribe. And so that we want to lower those hurdles and those obstacles for participation. And then I think a critical part of the attraction to community solar is that it allows for competition, free market competition, right? So we don't want the utility to be the only, they can compete, and if they develop a better project, they, bravo to them, but they should be competing with everybody who wants to develop this kind of project. And for all the reasons that we are aware So I want to talk a little about the specific questions. Let's say you are looking at a community solar project, and I think it's important to ask a series of questions to help you evaluate whether this is a good investment for you. And so there's, I think, 10 of these questions, and I'll go through them. Are the energy savings pricing and subscription process transparent, clear, and consumer-centered, right? Are the costs and benefits clear and transparent and shared with subscribers? What are the upfront costs? What are the ongoing costs, right? There should be numbers for each of these. And if it's not easily available, that's a red flag. Is there a premium charged to run the program above the standard cost? This is of the electricity. This is what distinguishes true community solar often from utility run subscription programs, right? Is they're charging a lot of money in some cases, sometimes not so much. It really depends. I don't want to, be generalizing, but many of these programs really are glorified subscription programs, and you're paying them the middle person here when that's not a necessary cost in many cases. It's important to know what the term of your subscription will be. Is it a 1-year commitment, a 2-year commitment? How much notice do you have? Can you transfer it when you move? Most programs now have some portability, usually within the same utility area, and that's important to know. Is the program available to everyone in the utility area? Sometimes these programs they don't offer to everybody, only certain parts of the utility area, and so you should know that. That's a red flag for us. We want as many people to be able to participate in these programs as possible. You should ask, I think, what the program does to ensure low and middle income participation, and what are those savings for those people? After all, people from lower incomes, with lower incomes and middle incomes, they actually pay a greater proportion of their income on energy and electricity and utilities in general. So it's really important that they receive these benefits. So how does the program ensure it? If they say yes, but we can't explain how, that is an issue. And we can talk about a program when we get to the examples that does that. Is there, again, a competitive procurement process for developing and building the project? Can anybody bid on this? And is your subscription tied to a specific solar project array, or is it some generic solar source and you don't know where exactly the solar is? So that's a key question. Where is my community solar project located? Is it close? Is it a group of projects that are spread out in the same county? That kind of question. All right, so I want to talk about some examples of real programs. The first one, and there's a picture of John Mariani next to this. This is a really attractive project. John lives in a downtown neighborhood in Baltimore, and he built a 10 kilowatt solar array on the roof of his small apartment building that he owns. And then he used Maryland's community solar law to split the system's energy output between his home, his sister's home, and the rental building meter. So this is sort of a win-win-win. He developed his own project. Not everyone was to do this kind of thing, but people should be allowed to develop their own projects. And John's is a great example. This one, the Sussex Solar Garden, is an interesting example. Alan Spector and his neighbors in New Jersey convinced their electricity co-op, so this is a rural co-op, to permit them to build and operate a 50 kilowatt array and then distribute the power to 18 investor owners. Great example. And there's links to all this in our guide if you want to follow these examples more. I like this one in Vermont. It was a 150 kilowatt one in Boardman Hill Solar Farm, and they developed this project from scratch as a group of individuals, and it's a really attractive looking one. I couldn't find a picture of it this morning, but it's a really cool looking one in the rural setting. As I said, rural electric co-ops and municipal utilities also offer community solar programs. And so again, some of these are meet our guidelines and principles, and of course, the ones that we're highlighting here, for the most part, do, and then others do not. So here's a really good example: the Vernon Electric Cooperative in Wisconsin. It provides monthly bill credits for the power produced on people's bills, and with an upfront cost of $600 per panel and a projected first-year payback of nearly 6%. And then these savings are stipulated to increase as energy prices rise. So there's an example where there's some fixed costs there, but the prices are transparent. It's very clear what you would be getting involved in and what you'd be getting. And that turns out, if you run the numbers, to be a pretty good deal for people in that co-op. Another example is the Florida Keys, which is a pretty progressive electric co-op. They have a program called the Simple Solar Program, and they offer people a monthly bill credit equal to their retail rate for each kilowatt generated for their subscription for 25 years, based on the actual production of the leased panels. So that's an innovative program. 25-year subscription might not be for everybody. I know that there is a way to terminate the subscription, but I don't recall the exact details. But this kind of innovation and competitive model is an interesting one, and I think other people are looking at it. Another one would be the Orlando, Florida Utilities Commission program, and again, this allows for controlling your energy costs. They allow people to lock in a rate of 13 cents per kilowatt, which is a good deal in Florida. It may not be the right deal for where you live, for 25 years generated by their community solar share. And then they, I won't read the rest of this, but it's an interesting program. I would not say this is a true community solar program, but it's one of the better utility run ones. A word about some state programs. As I said before, that in order to have a community solar program, you have to have your state enable it, whether that's through legislation or through the Public Utilities Commission. I think it's worth noting that Colorado was the pioneer here. They are the first state to pass a statewide, they call them shared renewables, solar gardens, sometimes people call them that. And they did this back in 2010. And so they clearly established some of the principles that we were talking about. The owner of the system could either be the utility or a third-party operator that contracts with utility for the production. And subscribers receive full retail credit, like the same way net metering would work if you owned it on your own house.
Oh, Alexis, can you hear Glenn?
I was just chatting you. I can't hear you, Glenn.
I don't know what happened, Glenn, but we just lost your audio. All of a sudden. We still can't hear you.
No, still no.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I took off my headphones. I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. So the New Jersey program is notable because it really is one of the strongest LMI programs, or low and middle income programs, in regards to community solar in the United States. It is a 3-year community solar pilot program that just launched. It sets aside, it mandates 40% of the overall program's capacity to serve low and moderate income customers. So that's sometimes called a LMI carve out, and that's a question you want to ask. Does it force every project? Does it mandate every project? It's interesting, of course, the 40% number. In some places they're talking about 50%. And of course, for most of these projects to make business sense, there has to be some combination of market rate and LMI set asides. Just to give you a sense of the size of New Jersey's program, they are estimating that it could cover roughly the electric usage of 45, it's actually more than 45,000 residents. So that's a good start for a 3-year program. So I want to talk about the resources to learn more, and then we can get into the Q&A section. First of all, if you go to solarunitedneighbors.org and you go at the drop-down menus to learn the issues, and one of those learn the issues is community solar, and there is a lot of information to help you learn more and to pursue these issues. 3 ones that I want to highlight are our community solar guide. Remember, I showed you a picture of that with the blue cover at the very beginning of this presentation. That's available there. It's, it's highlighted in a box. Our community solar siting guidelines, and this is, I think, very helpful when people evaluate whether a project is going to be, fit into the community. Many of these programs are in agricultural areas or rural areas, and so we want to make sure that those are sited responsibly. And then we did a couple of reports, the most recent of which is on the website on the community solar program in Maryland. And so I highlight this even if you're not in Maryland, because it really is a discussion of what we have learned about how these programs can and should be run. Some mistakes that Maryland made and how to fix them. Right now, that program is taking off. We also have a pilot project to help consumers, prospective consumers for community solar projects, evaluate and compare various projects. And so that's one of the problems is that consumers, what do you do? And so we've developed this cs.solarunitedneighbors.org site. And right now it's just limited to projects in Maryland, Colorado, Washington, D.C., and Minnesota. But we're looking to expand that project. And if you're in one of those states, you want to look at it now. But again, even if you're not in one of those states, it'll give you a sense of how to compare apples to apples in a fair way. Finally, if you have an email question after this, or we don't get to your question, we're always happy to receive your emails. We'll do our best. Liz and I will be answering those. And that's advocacy@solarunitedneighbors.org. And with that, I will stop and we can go to Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, and I can put that advocacy email, or Alexis can put it in the chat soon, but we already have a couple great questions and welcome people to continue asking questions through the chat or the Q&A. Glenn, I guess the first one we got, somebody noted that the map did not include New Jersey, and you noted it didn't include Pennsylvania, so I'll maybe contact them about updating that. It looks like you can submit legislation to them to update that. And there was a question more specifically about New Jersey. So can you talk about how the LMI, or low and middle income verification, is going, and if there's room to make it easier, quicker for LMI folks to participate? I don't know. That's kind of like in the weeds, Glenn. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much in the weeds on that, but I would say that that's a very good question because, as I said, we want to make sure we don't enact unnecessary hurdles for people. The whole point of community solar is to broaden solar access, and it really is because low and middle income people are the least likely to own their own buildings and so forth. It's important to streamline this possible. Thank you, Peter. I see your comment. So New Jersey has been working out this, and the basic problem is, how do you do the least burdensome method to verify people's income? Some people use things like qualifications for existing programs, like the LIHEAP program, where people who qualify and receive some assistance for energy. You want to make it as seamless and easy as possible. It's kind of a complicated issue, and I don't really want to go into it too much. But there's information on this on our website, and also we discussed this issue in our Maryland report. And the New Jersey model is one of the better ones in the country. But what we don't want to do is intimidate people so that, oh my God, they got to get their IRS for it. You know, you can imagine that could be an obstacle. And we want to make it as seamless as possible. So I hope that's sufficient for now.
Cool, thanks, Glenn. And I can put the link in the chat again to more information about the New Jersey program that may have more details on that right now. And then let's see, we got a question. Oh, Peter Schmidt actually is noting that the New Jersey, I think Board of Public Utilities is announcing a streamlined process for LMI participation. So that's great news. Thank you, Peter, for sharing that. So they are trying, it sounds like they are trying to address that problem. There was another question. Can you talk about where in the process the legislation is in Virginia?
Well, it is, well, let me preface this by saying that Virginia has really been the greatest solar and clean energy success story in this year. At the beginning of the year, before the COVID pandemic started, Virginia passed some really groundbreaking legislation to increase their clean energy, including specifically distributed solar, that is rooftop solar. So it's in that context where I think the momentum is clearly moving in the right direction. The issue there, frankly, is you have monopoly utilities like Dominion, which do not like community solar in many ways, unless they're profiting or owning on it. And so they're not so happy about these programs, generally speaking. Now, there could be a win-win, and that would be to allow community solar in Virginia and have Dominion compete. And if they can outcompete third-party projects, great. But that's generally not what they're advocating for. And we see this in a lot of places around the country. And it's for really the same reasons that they are resisting rooftop solar, right? That it is really a threat to their business model, generally speaking. They literally see it as taking, customers and profits away from them. So that is an outdated way of thinking about utilities, and utilities should be facilitating our energy choices and our energy freedom, and that's the state. We do expect a community solar legislation to be introduced again in Virginia.
Thanks, Glenn. There are a bunch of other great questions. Thanks, everyone. So there's one about how do I find out what types of community solar programs are available in my area? And so I'm going to respond with the link to our programs. And we have good programs in Colorado, DC, Maryland, and Minnesota, as Glenn mentioned on a slide. But I think in other places it's a lot harder, and there are a lot of things called community solar that aren't really what we would say are community solar. So Glenn, I don't know if you want to talk more about that, or you have any other ideas about how people can find good programs.
Yeah, well, you've made the point that I want to emphasize, which is it is confusing for a lot of people. If you're not going to develop your own program and you want to look at what's out there, and you're hearing advertisements about this either from your utility or it's being pitched to you in some way. I mean, that was the purpose of this guide, right? It was to help people ask the right questions, but it does put a lot of burden on people, right? It's one thing to say, ask these questions, and it's another one to get the answers. So, we realize that. But it's a start, and I think posing these questions will help people. We are advocating that in every community solar state program that there be either the Office of Energy or whatever the place is called in your state, that they provide this online service to have all the projects listed and to have some apples to apples criteria that you can look at. We think that would really help a lot. Otherwise, it's going to be up to nonprofits like Solar United Neighbors to do this and others. one good place to start is checking your utility and see what they offer and what they claim, if it's a community solar project or not. It doesn't take too much digging, really, 10 minutes to see that many of these projects are subscription services and don't qualify, at least in our opinion, as community solar projects. On the other hand, we don't want to be too dogmatic about this, right? Some of these programs may offer good deals for some people depending on their circumstances. And so as much as I'm being critical about these utility-run programs, they may make sense for some people in some circumstances. And so you really got to do some homework. The utilities will proudly talk about the programs that they have, they should have not too much fine print, hopefully. Public utility commissions also have a responsibility here to make sure that the consumers are fully informed. There are community solar developers who have multiple projects around various states, and very often if you call or go onto the website of large community solar project developers, they will list all of their projects, and some of them do a very good job showing what the math is, that's another way to approach it. And they'll be glad, of course, to talk to you about the projects and answer some of these questions, either in email or on the phone. Liz, you're muted.
Okay, sorry. We've talked about this a little already, but there was a question around what are the main incentives for an investor-owned utility to want to support community solar, as you described, when it's shareholders want the best bang for their buck. I don't know if you want to say more about that.
Well, in the states that where utilities are offering these programs, they're doing it because they think it's a good business prospect, that they will make money off of it. They'll be able to get enough subscribers to profit. And they have every right to do that. But the problem is, if they're a regulated utility, that is, they're a monopoly, and then there are some more stringent guidelines on what they can and cannot do. After all, monopoly utilities are regulated so that that's an exchange for them having no competition. So they're doing it because, for the reason that private developers would do it, is to make a reasonable profit, and there's nothing wrong at all with that. The real question is they providing the key savings and delivering the benefits to community solar for people, as I talked about earlier. So that's why they're doing it. They want to own it. That's why they're building in many places, large utility scale solar projects, basically giant power plants, but instead of being fueled by natural gas, or they're fueled by sunshine, right? And they're pretty happy owning the power source and selling it as if they would sell any other power. So I don't think their problem is with the energy source. It's a cheap and affordable and great energy source, we all know now. The real issue is whether they see the community solar project developed by, say, citizens or neighbors or churches or whatever, as a threat to their business model. And the real truth is that they often do, and we need to make sure that we reform the way utilities make money. And there's a lot of wonky policy about performance-based standards, and that they can make money by helping to accomplish what the community wants, like lowering pollution levels and increasing clean energy. And I think that's the context where we want to change that discussion, and that's kind of high-minded, but I think that's an important part of what's going on right now.
Thanks, Glenn. And this is sort of a related follow-up question that I can provide an answer to, at least to start off, and then you can add on, Glenn. But somebody asked about, they said they thought Florida did not allow for community solar, but then we had examples from Orlando and the Florida Keys. And so this person lives in Florida Power and Light country in Florida, and wants to know more about what is prohibiting us from being able to have community solar where I live. So I'll provide some context there. So the city of Orlando is a municipal utility, and the Florida Keys is an electric co-op. So they actually have less regulation in most states and are more able to sort of do whatever they want. Sometimes they have to get approval by the utility commission, but they often can sort of have more flexibility. So I think they both, you know, those utilities were able to just decide that they wanted to offer community solar and set it up however they wanted to. I think that FPL and Duke, the investor-owned utilities, are the major ones in Florida, have set up community solar-like programs that are sort of like pay extra for solar programs that I think we're not big fans of. But Glenn, I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
I don't really want to talk about Florida Power Light's community solar program, to tell you the truth, but which we don't regard. I mean, it's good that they're offering something for people, but they're clearly not delivering the meaningful energy savings in that particular program. And so that's a very Florida specific thing, but that covers most people. But the key here is that municipal utilities, as Liz pointed out, and rural electric cooperatives, they can basically do what they want in most states. Right? They can offer these programs if they choose. Sometimes there are constraints, but for the most part, they're not bound by this. They can just say, we want to do this. And it makes sense, since both of those cases, those are nonprofit organizations. I don't know if you think about it that way, but that's what they are. And they should be providing that kind of service to their members or their residents. So that's why there are those examples in Florida. It also shows you that there's a great demand in Florida for true community solar.
Yeah, and this question specifically was like, what is prohibiting us from being able to have community solar? So I think I would say that FP&L and Duke, the investor-owned utilities in Florida, I think are very powerful, and they don't want to have third-party competition. They don't want to open up the market for community solar, and so I think they're not letting that happen. Right?
Yeah, I mean, this is simply a legislative fight that is going to continue, and you know, we're joining with other advocates, solar supporters, to, as I said, we're working on this right now in Pennsylvania, and I think we're going to get there, and then you know, we're going to run it at Florida again and again and again until we prevail. But that's why we need people like you all to mobilize and make your voice heard in these fights, and so that's part of, you know, our mission as well. So we'll be sure to keep you in the loop on those when in your particular state.
Cool, thanks, Glenn. And then someone says they love our website, the community solar website that has the different options in different states. It's a great way to compare. Just wondering if we're planning on adding other states that have community solar. That's a great question. Do you know the answer, Glenn?
I know that Corey Ramston, who is my colleague, who is directing that program, is always looking for ways to expand it. We are in discussion to expand it for some more states. You know, all I can tell you is that we'll let you know.
Yeah, great question. Okay, we've got another question. Do you have any stories about utilities that cooperate poorly or not at all with community solar? I mean, I think we just mentioned some in Florida, but Glenn, I don't know if you want to add on to that for some other states.
Not really. Again, I don't think you can separate the community solar tension here than the just rooftop solar tension in many states. So, you know, the larger politics of this have been a pretty ugly and contentious for quite some time, and they're not really stopping. You know, there are efforts to, for example, in many states to either weaken or entirely eliminate net metering policies, which is sort of the foundational policy that simply gives people credit for the energy they send to the grid from their solar power. And that really, of course, makes the economic case for solar so great, right? And that's fair, and that's, you know, why shouldn't you be compensated for the power that you send, right? Of course you should be. So those fights are raging everywhere, and I think it's in that context where we see the same community solar fights. They're on sort of parallel tracks, but it's all in the same train tracks.
All right, and I think we only have about one more question so far, but feel free to continue using the Q&A in the chat to ask additional questions. These are all really great. So there's
well,
one.
I have a question too after the, why don't we do this one and then I have a question for folks.
Okay. We got one. Do utilities typically pay for solar power from community solar at the wholesale rate? So, I mean, I think that's an interesting question. It may depend on the setup. I guess I can say that my municipal utility here in Omaha, Nebraska, I think that they do have a community solar program that, you know, I would say is basically just pay extra for solar. And I think they set up a, I think it's a 1 megawatt site, and I think they have a power purchase agreement. So I think that they are paying a relatively low rate for that, and then they're selling it to people for more than that. So
Buy low, sell high. Right?
I think that's basically how my local sort of community solar program works. But Glenn, I don't know if you want to talk more about the like how that works at other utilities.
No, it's variable. It depends, but generally utilities are when they do build these community solar arrays or utility scale, they've got big contracts, and their rates are fixed whether it's through a power purchase agreement or not. But these that's how they're making the profit. And again, that's fine, but the idea is competition is healthy and is good for consumers. The question I have for the group is there anybody here who is a participant in a community solar project, and where? And also, has anyone on here sort of investigated a community solar project, considered it? I'm really curious, and what happened?
Those are really great questions, Glenn.
Here's one from Dwight. So, where is this, Dwight? Where's your project? Where do you live?
That is a good question, Glenn. I'm not sure we're neighborhood solar or neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't know. Silver Spring, Maryland. So what has your experience been, Dwight? I mean, I'm really curious. I mean, obviously you're typing in, so it's a little difficult, but.
Glenn, we could unmute people if.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Alexis, can you do that? Yeah, this is.
Oh, there you go. That was fast, Alexis.
Yeah. So Dwight, what's your experience been? And I'm curious, does your project meet many of the principles that we lay out?
A large number of them, they do.
Great.
It's run by a B Corp here in Silver Spring. I get a 5% discount off the Pepco rate. I asked the question about uncooperative utilities because both for my rooftop solar and for Neighborhood Sun, Pepco has been slow rolling us. Neighborhood Sun hasn't been able to send out, I shouldn't say this on the open internet, they haven't been able to send out an accurate bill for 3 months because Pepco's not giving them the information they need to do it.
Yeah, we hear those stories. We hear those stories.
I also have another problem,
yes.
and that is prior to community solar, I had a wind generation 100% clean. And because of the way Maryland credits solar production for a community solar, Pepco never paid my third-party generator. I've got $1,000 credit on my bill that's owed to that third-party generator, and they're just not paying it.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you about that. So just so I'm clear, and I think just to clarify for others too, so it sounds like you would also subscribe to some kind of clean power option that include wind power from a
Correct.
Maryland-based. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. That's one of those utility complaints you hear a lot. I don't know that Pepco is notorious at all, but I think, we've heard stories like that with Pepco. That's for everyone else, that's the DC, Maryland, Mid-Atlantic utility, monopoly utility.
Cool. All right, Glenn, we've got another person is sharing their story in the Q&A, Lisa Conley. I don't know if we want to take her off mute and chat about. Sounds like they're working on a project in Wisconsin.
Oh, great. I'd love to hear about that. Hi, Lisa. We can't hear you, but you're unmuted.
Can you hear me? No?
There you go.
Can you hear me?
We can just barely hear you.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah, it's very faint, Lisa.
Okay, well, I'll yell.
Oh, that's better.
Yep,
That's better.
better.
Just get up close to the mic. That's all.
Okay, it's right here. Okay, we just had a first conversation because we wanted to put solar panels on our roof, but we'd have to cut down big trees, and I don't think that's a good trade-off. So we talked to Oconomowoc City Utilities. That's a nonprofit, and it's part of WPPI. And they seem real interested in doing it. They have a piece of land that would be good connection within the city, and we're just getting ideas about how to approach people and what a business plan would look like. My husband and I are trying to think about, if somebody doesn't want to pay $10,000 or $20,000 up front, which is what they want money up front,
Yeah.
we could negotiate with the local banks to get some like a solar mortgage or something like that, so
Yep,
they'd pay
yep.
it off slowly. Any experience with something like that?
Well, there's no national green bank or anything like that, unfortunately, but there are state programs, and to tell you the truth, I don't know what exists in your state in Wisconsin, but there are many financing options for this kind of thing, primarily because it's such a safe investment, right? I mean, we know that power will be produced. People are going to pay money for that power, so there's like very low risk on these projects. They're safe investments, so to speak. So you do see various loan products for this kind of thing, and the program would have to be, that's on a case-by-case basis. I would check your state energy office to see if they have information on their website on financing options. That's an interesting issue. I've heard of lots of projects that did receive financing. I'm curious, how many people would be going in on your project?
Well, it depends on how much they want to pay. We've got, they're talking 1 megawatt system.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah. So, so many people would pay 20,000 or another 10 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you one thing that's an interesting option is that sometimes these projects, for the financing and to just make the math work, have a so-called anchor tenant. So somebody who uses a lot more energy, like a local business or a religious institution or a school, that kind of thing, they would be the anchor tenant that take up, say, half of the project, the power from half the project, and then the rest of it would be divided into shares. So that helps, sometimes makes it work. So you might want to look into something like that. If there is it doesn't have to be take half, but even to a couple of anchor tenants to take big chunks, it'll help make the project viable.
Yeah, apparently, if you get more than, I think it's 20 kilowatts from this as an individual, that the rate goes from 11 cents a kilowatt hour. That WPPI would only pay us back 3 cents or whatever.
Oh, that's crazy disincentive.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
we're going to have to put together a group of smaller
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, so that's another one of those obstacles that I've been talking about. That's a really good example, actually. Yeah, that's true. That's true, Dylan. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I guess somebody just wanted to know if Lisa had looked at crowdfunding platforms as a way to raise funds.
No, we just actually had our first conversation last week with the utility and kind of turned in this direction. and so yeah, no, I haven't even thought about that.
Yeah, I've heard fun anecdotes about crowdsourcing. I mean, community solar projects, but don't know that we have much information on that, to tell you the truth right now.
Yeah, and then Glenn, there was a question from Dylan about saying he works for a solar company and equally beneficial for them would just be to have virtual net metering approved. So he wanted to know more, if we could talk more about that and the community solar and the difference and the sort of connections.
Yeah, I mean, as you could tell, we would very much, virtual net metering is simply, again, a billing credit arrangement. So some of the questions with virtual net metering, that is, your project could be located in the country and you could draw power from it through a share in your, say, suburban or urban location, but also maybe your business, right? So you could have multiple shares to cover multiple meters. And so that's something we strongly support. That's what we're advocating right now for in Pennsylvania. That's that's part of the legislation now that we're tussling with to try to make sure that virtual net metering is a part of that program.
Thanks, Glenn. I think we are out of questions unless there are any other folks with questions that want to chat them or put them in the Q&A. But I think it's also fun to give you back a couple minutes of your day.
It is lunchtime, after all. I just want to thank everybody for taking the time. Friday noon, this is Eastern. This is not the best time for a lot of people, and I really appreciate you showing the interest in community solar. And I hope you check out the resources on our page, and I hope you become strong advocates for solar and community solar where you live. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you all, and thanks Glenn and Liz for all your work on this. Again, folks, feel free to reach out to them with any other questions that you have that come up. We'd like to thank you all for attending this National Solar Tour session. If you'd like to support the National Solar Tour and ensure it continues to be a free event for other solar supporters, consider making a donation to Solar United Neighbors, and I just dropped a link for that in the chat. And also feel free to check out the additional events that we have happening throughout the weekend and later today. So thank you all again for attending. We hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.